Good afternoon. I'm Marcus Pask, coming to you from Spain, and welcome to Talent Unplugged Across the Pond, the show where we dive into the honest and often messy truth about hiring.
Good morning. I'm Megan Conlon, coming from Houston, Texas. And this is the show coming to you from two continents, two perspectives, one unfiltered conversation about how we look at the recruiting industry. Well, episode 2, can you believe it?
Two, love this. I'm enjoying it. Episode 2, yeah. This is and we've got some good topics for today as well.
I'm
I'm
excited.
excited.
How's your week been?
Week's been good. Yeah, we're in the midst of moving at the moment, so we are staying close by. But as anyone knows, whenever you're moving, doing all the packing and getting everything done and doing some clear
Oof.
outs. So it's been a busy couple of weeks, but we are almost there. So I'm excited, but this will be one of the last, I think got one more maybe before I go, where it will be this setting, and then there'll be a new setting for us or for myself in the future. So yeah, excited, very excited.
Good for you. Good for you. And how is consulting going?
Consulting's good. Yeah, I mean, it's busy. Which is a good thing from a business perspective.
Yep.
It is maybe an interesting thing for people that are out there. And so I have my own company, which is going well, Shaping Your Path, where I help people in the market, try and navigate this world of finding a new job through CVs and interviews and
Hmm.
being very targeted. And yeah, it's quite interesting. I had a call this week with someone, and they've been at a company, I won't name which, for about 8 years, and they've just gone through a layoff process. And she's been trying to find a role now for the last probably 2 months. And she was like, "Yeah, Marcus, I thought it was going to be pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Every time I've done this in the past, it would be I'd send an application in, I'd get an interview, I'd have probably 2 or 3 offers, and now she said for the last 2 months that she's just got no interviews. She's not getting, anyone responding back to her. She doesn't know where to start. She feels a little bit lost.
Yeah.
So it's always sad when I hear these conversations because, it's just a really difficult market right now. And, what worked 2, 3, 4 years ago is just way more competitive. So I feel for her, and I feel for anyone else that's in those situations, but it kind of sheds some light on why these discussions are really important, because we highlight what is probably going on in talent acquisition and for anyone else that's looking for a job.
It's so true. I have someone very close to me that's also went through a layoff and is in the job market and has been in the job market longer than I think they expected to be.
Yeah.
Um, Even if they have, the minimum qualifications or even overqualified, are not
Yeah.
getting calls. So
No.
hopefully, throughout our conversations, we can give a little bit of hope and guidance
Yeah.
and at least understanding of why that might be happening. But it is a very, very tough market right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And, it's not a small percentage. It's a large, large percentage of people that are feeling this right now. So yeah, it's been an interesting week, but yourself, what's new in your world of TA?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for our listeners, I work for a startup here in the United States called Miter. We're construction tech. We're just under 100 folks, and we are growing like gangbusters. Really, really excited to be on this journey with this company. And fortunately, I am hiring both a business recruiter and a tech recruiter for my team. So that's always
Nice.
really exciting. Um, and we are in the headcount process. So we are recording this podcast on October 29th.
Yeah.
So Q4 for most companies. And generally, this is the time to be doing your headcount planning for
Yeah.
the next fiscal year. So finance teams and people teams and your go-to-market leaders are coming together to prioritize and plan for their team growth
Yeah.
for the year ahead. So we're certainly in that planning process right now, which is fun. And what's actually been really, really nice is that recruiting has been brought to the table for those
Ooh,
conversations as well. So
that is a
that's been
rarity.
awesome.
That is a rarity. You've managed
Yeah.
to unblock something there. For everyone that's listening, it's actually quite an interesting point that you touched on. You're starting to do headcount planning. Leadership is starting to do headcount planning, budgeting, those types of things. Do you think that this has an effect on applications? Has it an
Mhm.
effect on hiring for people? If I'm in the market, I'm looking for a new job. Should I be applying for jobs now? Should I wait until next year because those planning's taking place? It's quite an interesting topic that maybe no one touches on. So, what do you think about it right now?
Yeah, I think that is dependent on the company because there are
Hmm.
companies like Miter that their Q4 ends end of December,
Yeah,
and then we want everyone in place by Jan 1. So we're actually doing a significant amount of hiring here
yeah,
at the end of the year so that we have folks in place to start the new year off.
yeah,
But there are other companies like our previous company together where,
yeah,
our Q4 didn't end until end of January.
yeah.
So, and headcount planning processes didn't complete until around that time.
No,
So I think it depends. So suffice to say, keep applying.
yeah,
You may see a surge in January, February of jobs for the new year, but then
yeah,
again, there are companies like mine that are doing a considerable amount of hiring right now in preparation to be set up
yeah.
for success for the next year.
Yeah, and I touched on it because it was, again, something that someone mentioned to me this week, like one of my clients, and she said, should I be applying for jobs? Should I wait? Like Christmas period's coming up. It feels like there's
Mm-hmm.
never enough roles, people on holiday. And I don't think people really are able to just pause on this at the moment. There's never really a time that you should be pausing on looking for a new job because, like you
Right.
said, lots of companies go through different phases. And actually, some companies will slow down for the year. Some companies will get faster because, you've got goals for next year. And if it's a critical role to the business, then they'll continue to try and hire great talent.
Yep.
And I think that's super important for people to know that anytime they can continue to look at opportunities. You just might experience a slight delay if people are on holiday or if there's
Right.
some shifts in priority, but generally continue as you are, I think is always a good message from people looking.
Yes, of course. And we also as a recruiting team try and bake in our time to fills or our time to starts,
Yeah.
our forecasting because we know there's a 2 to 3 week period in December where both candidates and
Hmm.
hiring teams are not available for interviews.
Yeah.
So yes, there's the inevitable slowdown around the holiday time, but not necessarily of roles that
No.
are being hired for.
And you're hiring for your team, and
Yes.
maybe something, what is the difference between a tech recruiter and a go-to-market recruiter? Because we touched on recruitment, like what you and I have done for the last 20 years and, all of this. But for people that don't know, usually when we have our recruitment teams, we'll split them into a couple of buckets where we have go-to-market, we'll have tech, and they'll focus on those specialties, on those roles. But what is the difference between a tech recruiter and a go-to-market recruiter?
Yeah, great question. So, and I definitely want you to answer this question as well because you've
Yeah.
led both types of recruiters as well. At the foundational level, they're the
Hmm.
same. The
Yeah.
skill sets, in my opinion, are the same. Attracting talent, moving them through the process, great candidate experience, relationship building,
Yeah.
similar relationship with hiring managers and stakeholders with the reporting and the kickoffs, the offer process. Where it gets nuanced, and
Hmm.
the true difference is the portion of the business that recruiter supports. So technical recruiting tends to be engineering product design or
Hmm.
EPD teams for short.
Yeah.
Business recruiters tend to own everything else on the business side. So
Hmm.
you can have recruiters that even specialize further into go to market, which is generally your sales teams, your marketing teams, and then your post sales or customer success teams, um, your operations teams, your G&A
Yeah.
teams. So you can have recruiters that even specialize deeper than that, but the very basic difference
Yeah.
is business side of the house versus engineering product design side of
Yeah.
the house. Now, once you remove the fundamentals of recruiting, if you are fundamentally a good recruiter,
Hmm.
what I have found the nuances are in the way in which you're able to pitch the role, both from a sourcing perspective and then
Hmm.
also the qualification call between an engineer versus an account executive,
Yeah.
the technical qualifications and the speed in which an engineering interview process might
Yeah.
move tends to be much slower
Yeah.
than a customer support rep or again an SDR or a sales rep.
Hmm.
Those tend to move much more quickly. Like urgency and speed, you lose the deal
Yeah.
if you don't move with urgency. And then the offer process. We're finding at MITRE the creativity that we have to deploy for attracting top level engineers
Hmm.
is has been a great learning curve for me.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
you have to be very creative to attract that top engineering talent.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not that you don't have to be competitive with
Yeah.
go to market, but generally, if there's a good synergy, the qualifications match, and the compensation package matches,
Yeah.
within a couple of days, you're going to get an offer
Yeah.
accept from an AE.
Yeah.
Versus our engineers, we're giving them
It's a lot of competition.
4 to
Yeah.
5 weeks sometimes to mull over our offer, go to the office. We've flown engineers to
Yeah.
opposite offices. We've had investors give them a call. It is a very tailored
Hmm.
experience to attract that talent. So the nuance there has been
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It is. They are a bit of chalk and cheese, how you have to
Yes.
approach it. And also, with go-to-market recruiters, versus kind of tech recruiters. Within tech, you'll have an engineering recruiter who might be really strong at front-end recruiting or back-end or
Yep.
machine learning engineering or AI engineering. So they kind of go an even level deeper of a specialist tech recruiter. And then the same is really with go-to-market. You might have a specialist that does marketing or a specialist that, like you said, does sales or things like that. But I always felt like with go-to-market recruiters, you sometimes needed to flex between certain teams because you might see spikes in operations, in marketing, maybe in HR, in finance. So if you've been traditionally a sales recruiter for 3 months, 6 months, you might need to pivot across to one of those other functions to go and support. So you can usually be a bit more all-rounder. Whereas within tech, it always felt even more specialized that, a front-end engineering recruiter might not want to go and be a back-end engineering recruiter
Yeah.
or machine learning. They want to stay in their stream a little bit more.
Yep.
Which is fine. It's just that the way that you and I have had to work on those nuances in the past when we're looking at teams, and also for candidates out there that you might be speaking to, in go-to-market, you might be speaking to a recruiter about a sales job, but they might not be a full expert on a sales profile. They may have just come across from hiring for marketing roles and vice versa. Whereas usually within the tech space, they'll be really narrowed down on the exact, like you said, scope of the role or some of the extra learning that needs to go into it. So it's quite an interesting space for sure.
It is. It's very interesting space. And I would say that the pitch of the company is different between
Yeah.
go to market and um, technical candidates as well. So
Yes.
both have their challenges. Both require a skilled recruiter in order to
Hmm.
keep a candidate engaged and to attract the right candidate to the team.
Yeah.
But definitely a nuanced skills
Yeah.
once you depart from the foundational recruiting
Yeah.
skill set.
And then and obviously within this, you have lots of different levels and layers to it. You might have more junior, more middle level, more senior ICs, managers. It's like within any company or any function, you're going to have those different levels of expertise. And this is just our experience, of where you and I have worked during our careers. Maybe there are other companies that do it differently, other
Yeah.
recruiters that specialize in different way. Obviously, we've not touched on it, but you have agency recruiters versus in-house
Hmm.
recruiters, which we can
Hmm.
touch on in the future. But I think with any of this, it's how we've seen it work or how we've seen it built in the past, and how you're building your team right now at MITRE as well, which is
Yeah,
exciting.
it's always so exciting. And because we have a small team at MITRE, our people team itself right now is only 4 people. So we're
Wow.
adding 2 more. So the qualifications are obviously very important, and
Yeah.
having that early startup experience where um, if you have not recruited against a somewhat unknown employer brand,
Hmm.
that is a unique experience in and of itself. If you come from a company where you have a significant amount of qualified applicants
Yeah.
because the name brand is
The
is
brand
well
is
known,
strong. Yeah.
whereas MITRE is still up and coming.
Yeah.
So that's been fun. But also we have at MITRE, one thing that I've really loved and feel a deep sense of ownership over is continuing to multiply our company against our values. So
Mm.
ensuring that every person that comes in meets our expectations around
Yeah.
values alignment. And I think you know just as well as anybody that like when your recruiting team has synergy and there's
Yeah.
strong partnership and feedback and collaboration, it is magic.
Yeah.
So being very intentional with
Yeah.
these hires, especially because it's such a small team.
Yeah, and it's a huge part of any hiring now, culture. It's something that maybe 10 years ago, companies would think about culture or alignment with the team, but it was always on just, as we touched on previous episode, like skills, on experience, that type of thing. Now, that culture piece is a huge aspect, which I think is super important because if
Hmm.
your smaller team, you're trying to keep that synergy and keep everyone moving in the same direction. And you don't want, like for like, you do want to have some differences there. That's
Yes.
super important. You don't want to have everyone that works the same way or has done things the same way.
Yes.
But for any candidate now going through an interview process, also for them, you need to think about the culture of that company. Do your
Hmm.
research, look at Glassdoor, look at other sites that they might use. But also for us, when we're doing those interviews, we might not be asking you a question specifically on culture, but we're assessing it through a recruiter interview, a normal interview, and we're picking up those ways of working. Will it work with the type of people that they would have in the role? And that can sometimes be difficult for people to spot, but it's definitely a big part of any hiring process now on culture and alignment.
Indeed. Indeed. And you hit on such an important topic. And I know it's hard for candidates, especially in a market that's as competitive as this, but don't forget that you're also vetting the company that
Yeah,
you're interviewing for. It should be a two-way street. And
yeah,
any recruiter that's worth their salt should treat the interview process in that manner, and hopefully the hiring teams as well, that they are representing themselves in a way in which you would actually want to accept the offer, because
yeah,
at the end of the day that candidate is the final decision maker on whether or not they join the
yeah,
team. So that ball is in your court
yeah.
too.
Yeah, don't be afraid to, if you're getting towards those final stages, ask for an extra conversation with
Mm.
someone that
Hmm.
they've recently hired. Like say, hey, can I speak to someone you've hired in the last 2 months? I'd love to learn what the culture or onboarding was like, or
Hmm.
see what feels comfortable. I wouldn't want someone to force it because we're telling them to do it, but I think there is some way there that you will start to get a bit more insights or maybe pick up on some of the flags you may have had, or just really feel comfortable about what the offer is and the company you're going into. Because yeah, we work what 9-10 hours a day, 5 days a week for these companies and your team. You
Yep.
want to get that right. So the ball is also in your court. As difficult as it is right now in the market, you still want to make sure you're making the right decision.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Should we do
Yeah,
our myth busting
let's go.
for this episode? So I think this is a really poignant one, especially as we just talked about the ball is in your court as a candidate at the offer stage.
Yes.
So here's our myth busting topic for this week, Marcus. Um, if I give my salary expectations on the first call,
Hmm.
I'll get rejected.
Mm.
True or false?
It depends.
Yes, it does. It
Yeah,
depends.
it really depends. I think, listen, I can understand why you might be rejected, or why candidates might be rejected, but I don't want to see that as a negative thing.
Hmm.
I think it's all about alignment. And as we've just discussed, like right now, a candidate is also assessing the company, and compensation will come into that as well. And so if you're having that first conversation with a recruiter, with someone from the company, and they ask you what your salary expectations are, and you give them, and they say, I'm really sorry, but it is not in line with what our expectations are, then it gives you an idea very early on about what it is that company might be looking to pay, or what they might be able to offer, or what is your own personal wiggle room.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't see that as a negative thing. I really think that can actually be in your court, where you can start to think about it. Okay, how much percentage am I out? Am I 5% away from where I really wanted to be? Is it 10%? Can I go a little bit lower? Can I, use this as negotiation in the future? Am I really interested in this role? So I don't think it's a problem that it's happening. However, I do understand the need sometimes for candidates to really hold off on sharing what they're wanting as a compensation, because they're really interested in the company and they don't want that to be the blocker. So I think if you're having some doubts about sharing, try and get some information from them, but then also use this as a future conversation, as a I'd rather not discuss compensation now because I'm super interested in the role and it's our first chat. Maybe we can discuss this after the next conversation, because I'll have more clarity on the role, and maybe, things feel more interesting and we can get some better alignment. But I'd rather continue the conversation than give my compensation right now. I think the other side to this is, it's actually really important for a TA team to try and get some compensation from guidance from candidates as well. And the
Yep.
reason for this is, we are not doing this interview to say, okay, well, someone is going to be 20,000 cheaper and we should go for them. That's not what our intentions are. Is to make sure that we're having productive conversations with candidates, and that there isn't a huge margin at the end of a whole overall process where we might be 25, 30% out, and then it feels like we've wasted both sides of the coin. Instead, what we're trying to do is really assess, where is the market right now. Maybe our compensation guidelines for this role are too low. And
Yes.
actually,
Hmm.
by us speaking to candidates in the market, we realize after 5, 6, 7 conversations that we need to increase our compensation guidelines by 10% to be more market competitive. So the intention for us in TA is not to do this as a blocker. It's really for us to help you as a candidate go through the process with as much information, and for us to also do it from our side. Long answer, but it's a complicated topic, and it differs for every single company as well. How do you
It
see it?
does. It does. And I think regionally it's handled
Oh
slightly
God, yeah,
different as well.
yeah,
In the United States, uh, most recruiters are asking that on the very first call. And I would say, in my experience, 90% of the time, candidates will give us
yeah,
either this is what I'm making now and this is what I expect, or
yeah.
this is the research I've done, this is what I expect.
Hmm.
And there is a back and forth on that call. Well, this is above our current budget for this role. Are you
Yeah,
open to moving forward, versus just a straight,
yeah.
rejection email? Let's maybe give a little bit of context around how compensation is arrived upon
Hmm.
internally.
Hmm.
And then perhaps that will give a little bit of guidance for our candidates, or our listeners, I should say. So, um, a company generally has bands that they use that are either from market data, from
Hmm.
software that you can pull based on the size of the company, the valuation,
Hmm.
the
Competition,
the
everything.
revenue. Exactly. Um, and then based on the level of the role that they're bringing on, they will have, between the 40th and the 90th percentile of a
Yep,
band that is market, uh, would be within the market for
yep.
that role, for that size of company. There's also generally an even wider band within that
Hmm.
that companies use for internal promotions as well.
Yep.
So the band may be relatively wide, and that is both to give a new employee plenty of room in
Yeah.
order to progress and get merit increases without needing to be promoted to the next level, for example.
Yeah.
And also to have some fluidity based on the interview performance and the seniority of the person coming in. Every company, at least every company I've worked for, has some sort of compensation philosophy around where they land within the band.
Yeah.
Some companies want to hit at the midpoint of that
Yeah.
band no matter what, and some companies are a little bit fluid.
Yeah.
So, to a candidate in the market, I implore you to come to conversations having done your market research,
Yeah.
not based on your past compensation, but based on the role that you're interviewing for, the size of company that you're interviewing
Yeah.
for, and the scope of the role that you're interviewing for.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is you may be coming from Meta
Yeah.
as a senior software engineer,
Mm-hmm.
interviewing for a role at a seed
Yeah.
startup
Yeah.
as a full stack product engineer,
Yeah.
founding engineer, and perhaps they don't even have levels
Yeah.
figured out yet. So your compensation at that large company
Mm-hmm.
is unlikely to match
Yeah.
the scope and the budget of the company you're interviewing for.
Yeah.
So that is definitely a watch out. I do want to encourage candidates to do their market research on the role that they're interviewing for, the
Yeah.
scope, the size of the company,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can come to those conversations armed with data
Yeah.
versus, well, this is what I was making before, so this is what I expect now. Because the scope of the role might not be the same and the size and
Exactly.
budget of the company might not be the same. Second is when a recruiter inevitably asks on the first call, what are your compensation expectations?
It's our
You are,
favorite question.
yes. Uh, you are well within your right as a candidate to say, what is the budget for the role?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in the United States, at least in states California and New York,
Mm-hmm.
we are legally required to put a compensation band on all job descriptions. At MITRE, we actually have them on every single job, which
Oh,
is
great.
something I love. We are
That's
very
great.
transparent about our compensation bands. But not every company is, but at least in those states, you have to have them posted.
Mm-hmm.
But you are well within your right as a candidate to say, what is the budget for this role?
Yeah.
If the recruiter comes back and says, unfortunately, I'm not able to share that information, you can follow up with, well, what is the compensation philosophy
Yeah.
of the company? Do
Yeah.
they think about coming in at the midpoint of a band? Do they bring in everybody externally at the low end of the band so that they can move upward
Yeah.
for merit increases or for great performance? Generally, the recruiter should understand the philosophy there. And if for whatever reason they don't, and you're
Mm-hmm.
not getting a number, you can do what Marcus suggested, which is punt the conversation to further in the process.
Yeah.
I would encourage you not to punt it so far as to offer stage,
Yeah.
because
Of
then
course.
if you're so far out, there's so wide a gap that
Yeah.
you've wasted your time as a candidate that you can't accept the offer. But do your market research and come with a figure that you are willing to accept
Mm-hmm.
based on the data that you have researched for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Love it.
Yes.
Comprehensive.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot and have provided some advice to some folks that are in the market
Yeah.
trying to navigate this, because it feels very much like a who's gonna break first, who's gonna
Yeah.
give away their information first, when
Yeah.
it should just be, hey, this is what I expect based
Yeah.
on the market for this role.
Yeah.
And this is, you need to know as a candidate, what is my floor?
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
What is my floor to be able to make ends meet, but
Mm-hmm.
also, live the way that I need to live?
Yeah.
And if the company is not going to match that, then it
Yeah.
wasn't a match anyway.
No, exactly. Exactly. And what you can do, you can stack rank these things as well. Like, is
Yeah.
compensation your number one motivator? Is it being remote first? Is it a company that is growing? Is it the culture? And have them as a candidate in the background figuring those things out. What is the most important thing for you for her? And you touched on it. In the US, in some of the states, it's a legal requirement to have that written about what the compensation is. In Europe, it's a lot more of a cat and mouse game of
Mhm.
what can I share? I don't want to share too much. What are you going to tell me as a recruiter? I was always the way of doing things whenever I did a recruiter screen was I was really transparent with anyone
Yeah.
that I interviewed. And I would just say, hey, for this role, we are going to be offering between 70,000 and 90,000 euros for this job, whatever the role was. The midpoint is around 80. The reason I'm sharing this with you is that we will go between that band for someone. It will depend on the experience. It will depend on how the interviews are. It will depend on how you are
Mhm.
in versus internal talent. So if you're looking for 90, we might not get there, but we might as well. It just depends on how you perform and how you compare internally. This is the band we're looking to pay for this role. Where do you feel that feels? Where do you feel it is for you? Like, does that match? Is it way more? Is it way less? And I've had sometimes candidates tell me, "Oh, I'm on 40,000. You giving me 70,000 is an unbelievable uplift." I'm like, "Well, it might be 80. I'm glad that you're sharing this with me, but we all base this on your experience and everything else. You might get a really big uplift." I had a lot of people come back to me and say, "Oh, I'm on more than that. Is there any room?" And I would say, "No, not right now. Like, we
Mhm.
have this band that we need to stick with." It could be that we get to the end of the process, and like you said, we go a little bit more because you have great experience. But I don't want to dangle this fish in front of you and you suddenly be, frustrated 5, 6 weeks down the line. So I'd rather be upfront and honest with you now. Not all recruiters work this way. Not all companies work this way. But I
Mhm.
think for us in TA and for the candidates, it's trying to have a very honest, transparent conversation where you possibly can and feel comfortable about what your number is. That's also it.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's the key there is be comfortable with what your number is. So
Yeah.
back to if I give my salary expectations on the first call, I'll get rejected. Well, it's possible it wasn't a match for you
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
If your floor is $100,000 and the highest I can present to you based on our our band, the scope of the role,
Hmm.
and internal equity as
Yeah.
well on the team is 80,000. It
Yeah.
wasn't a match, and it's
Yeah.
likely we would then part ways in the interview process because it would be a waste of time for both of
Exactly.
us. But that actually reminded me of like an additional layer that a candidate is within their right to ask. I don't know if a recruiter or hiring team would always provide this information, but internal equity should
Yeah.
also be important in hiring teams.
Hmm.
So, or internally at companies. So, a candidate asking, "Well, what's the median
Yeah.
salary of the team that's currently in house?" Like
Hmm.
that should also be a benchmark because it's important that there's not such wide variance of folks internally doing the same role,
No,
not making the same compensation.
exactly.
So,
And you touched on it a little bit there. It's also, if you can, and they're open to it, what was the recent comp increases for the team, in the last
mhm,
performance cycle? Was there a 3%, 5%, 10% increase? So you can get a feel for how quickly you might be able to cover that gap. Because if you are 5% off, but in your next year at performance review, you're going to get a 5% increase,
yes.
suddenly you're getting closer to that number that you were desiring. And also you can ask the questions around, if I was about to join, today, end of October, when is the next performance cycle? Is it
Mhm,
in February, where March, in April? Do I have to wait a year before I can have that next compensation question? Or can I put it into a contract, which doesn't happen that often, where, in 6 months down the line, if I'm hitting all of my targets, which I build, can I then have an increase to be more in line with what my expectations are? There's ways you can manage these conversations, and not all companies will say yes, but it's about how you can then picture what is your trajectory going to be like at that company from an internal equity standpoint as well.
indeed, indeed. It's all important information
Yeah.
for you as a candidate to have up front. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's just such a delicate yet important topic.
It is, and it goes by location, as you touched on. Like US and states is different. In Europe, it's different from country to country, and it's different from city to city. If I was speaking to someone in London and then they were looking for a role in Birmingham, for anyone that's not from the UK, they're different places, they're different equity standpoints. That difference could be 50%. So if you're moving from one city to another, San Fran, and you're
Yes.
moving to another state that's not New York or Austin or something like that, you're going to expect that compensation is going to be less. So I think it's also knowing what is that location of that company, where is their talent, and also then for remote people, that's also could be quite different with how it's done, because it might be done on a country level rather than a city level. So there's always these nuances that you have to think about.
Yes. But I think the conclusion is you as a candidate are well within your right to ask, what is the budget for this role or the
Yeah.
compensation band? What is this company's compensation philosophy about
Hmm.
how they bring on new talent? And what is the median internal compensation for folks that are in this role
Yeah.
currently on the team? And
Yeah.
then the fourth is when is the next performance review cycle and would I be eligible?
Yeah. On the topic, when should candidates be negotiating?
Hmm. When should candidates be negotiating? Well, in my opinion, once the offer has been extended
Hmm.
is when candidates should be negotiating. But ideally, they have already understood from the recruiter
Yeah.
what the compensation band is or done their research themselves, but have a firm understanding of their their floor
Yeah.
and where they'd ideally like to be, and what other levers are
Hmm.
important to them. For example, sign on bonus.
Yeah.
Is that something the company is open to? More equity is
Hmm.
genuinely another lever that companies are open to. Additionally, benefits.
Yeah.
So, is there a way to flex on more vacation time if
Yeah.
it's not unlimited PTO or a some sort of stipend?
Yeah.
Um, so I think there are definitely levers to make that total rewards package
Hmm.
more um, competitive and attractive. That's not just the cash.
Yeah.
But Marcus, you said it earlier. You have to understand, you as a candidate, what's most important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. The stack
Um,
ranking.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what do you think as far as negotiation?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you can't really do the negotiation part until you have an offer. But what I think you can do is you can manage it through the process where you're just checking in with the recruiter. Like, has anything changed here? Am I still, is there still a problem with, my expectations being at the end of that band? Is that going to be a deciding factor? Are there other things at play? As a recruiter, I would be having these check-ins almost every time I spoke with a candidate. I would say to them,
Yeah.
you're interviewing for another company, not just at X, you're also interviewing at Y and Z. What are they looking to pay? Are they higher than what our band is? Are they offering anything different to what we would be doing? And, as a recruiter, as a candidate, you wouldn't do this as much, but as a recruiter, I would be driving that conversation kind of every time I spoke to someone, so that, again, nothing felt out of place when we got to the final decision to extend an offer. And I think a candidate can flip that as well and be just having those conversations to say, hey, by the way, I'm interviewing with 2 or 3 other companies right now. Actually, those other 2 companies are offering 10% more or 15% more than what you're offering, but I'm still very interested. I know it's not the decision to be made now, but is it something that we can talk about in the future? Would that put me out of place? Manage what you're going through in a process to help you with all of the jobs that you're interviewing for. And it can feel uncomfortable. It can feel
Yeah.
like you're pushing it a little bit too much. So I think you have to be true to yourself and only do these conversations that feel comfortable for you, but know that it's not out of the ordinary to have those extended conversations when it feels right. When you're getting towards that final stage interview, do another check-in. When you're getting towards that offer piece, do a double check-in. And that's where you want to share as much as you can, rather than just be saying, oh, as a base salary, I'm looking for X. And if you've not told a recruiter, oh, I also get a car allowance, I also get
Mm-hmm.
bonus, I also get equity, that's suddenly worth 30, 40, 50,000. You need to share as much as you can. Don't be afraid about sharing, because that, at the end of the day, that's going to help you get the best possible offer at the end of the process as well.
Indeed. And if you haven't had that compensation expectation conversation in that first call, let's say
Hmm.
you're moving on to the presentation round, or you're moving on to the team round where you're investing a lot of time, and you know the end is imminent, and let's say the recruiter has not put time on your calendar to do what we call a pre-close
Yeah.
call, which is generally the preemptive touch base,
Yeah.
meaning that things are looking good, and if the next set of interviews go well, we're likely to put together an offer for you.
Hmm.
If a recruiter doesn't put that time on your calendar, you're within your right to ask
Yeah.
to put some time on the calendar to
Yeah.
talk through compensation expectations, because it is also your time
Hmm.
investment as well.
100%. It's a huge topic, and it's one that has been, I think, a taboo for a lot of people and a lot
Mm,
of candidates and just people to talk about, because it is, very personal. It's one of the more difficult conversations to have with a recruiter and with a company. But I think hopefully with our advice, people feel a little bit more comfortable with it in the future as well.
indeed. Well, should we wrap up here?
Yeah, and I was going to say, who have we got coming on next week? We have a special guest for our next podcast.
We do. Are we going to give away
I
the
think we
name,
can.
or really?
Well, I mean, maybe we don't give away the name. Maybe we give away some of their experience. Maybe that's a good thing for us to do.
Well, for any of our listeners that actually know Marcus and I professionally and personally, this next guest won't be a surprise, or our first guest won't be a surprise. But they are a very, very accomplished talent acquisition leader from companies like Box, from companies like Miro. They now have their own consulting and fractional talent acquisition leadership company, and they are very sought after for their expertise, wisdom, and general knowledge of what great looks like in
Yeah.
our industry. And we're so excited to be welcoming them on the next episode with another very juicy myth that we're going to bust.
Yes. Yes. And also for us to talk about what is fractional TA
Yeah.
recruitment.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm super looking forward to having her join us for our next episode.
Awesome. Well, we hope you've enjoyed listening, and we look forward to more stories, myth busting, and everything in between in our next episode. It's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from me. Bye.